So President Trump considering a rollback on some restrictions the administration had placed on China's Huawei, which is a move that would allow U.S. companies to sell products to the technology giant. Now, this after Mr. Trump met with Chinese President Xi at the G20 summit, and the two nations agreed to restart stalled trade talks.
What we've done in Silicon Valley is incredible, actually, and nobody's been able to compete with it. And I've agreed, and pretty easily, I've agreed to allow them to continue to sell that product so American companies will continue. And they were having a problem. The companies were not exactly happy that they couldn't sell because they had nothing to do with whatever was potentially happening with respect to Huawei.
Dr. Rebecca Grant is here. She's a nationalist, national security and military analyst, also an international relations expert. Dr. Grant, great to have you here.
Hi.
I want to start with the president's decision to hold off on new tariffs on China. Was this the right move?
Well, I think this is a tactical move, Arthel. It's very similar to what we saw happen in December after the last G20 summit. He goes to the G20, gets in a generous spirit, met with Xi, and decided to hold off on increasing the tariffs. Now, that still leaves a number of tariffs in place. So he's done this as a tactical move to help get started on talks towards that bigger Chinese trade deal that both he and Xi are looking for.
Right, but there are reports that Xi said no more talks unless you lift some of those restrictions on Huawei. So I ask you, does President Trump still have the stronger hand, or is his hand weaker? And will China keep playing a game and changing the game and banking on perhaps President Trump not getting reelected?
Well, this is just the beginning with Huawei, and President Trump kind of made a canny move back in May when he restricted U.S. companies from selling things like microchips into the Huawei supply chain. So all that he's done right now, I understand, is to let companies like Micron in Idaho and Intel and others in Silicon Valley go ahead and resume sales of microchips. That still leaves all the congressional law that bans Huawei from national security products. That's all still in place. So Trump kind of got himself in this place where he could back down just a little teeny bit and meet Xi's demand in a very narrow category. So I think right now, just a very tactical move on his part.
So is Huawei still a national security threat?
Yes, Huawei is a huge national security problem. You know, Secretary Pompeo says that Huawei is an instrument of the Chinese government. Now, Huawei denies it. They're a huge company, but the fact is, Arthel, they are owned by a holding company that is owned by a trade union, which is completely subject to the Chinese Communist Party. So there are two problems. One is holes in their software and firmware. The other is the possibility that Huawei could be implanting surreptitious devices into all the many products it sells around the world. That's why we have a ban on using Huawei products in our national security apparatus, and many of our allies have that same ban. They are definitely an enormous risk going forward.
Now, you still say, though, Dr. Grant, that this is a strategic move on the part of the president. What does the president gain in return for scaling back restrictions on Huawei?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think we're going to see a lot of blow by blow and going forward. Hard to say where this will end up. But right now, what he's gained coming out of the G20 is getting China back to the table. Remember, there was that blow up several weeks ago. They have a lot of larger issues that don't involve Huawei, but involve a number of U.S. and Chinese products. Trump is looking for that deal. China had not been willing to negotiate. Apparently now, having taken off just this little sliver of restrictions on Huawei, it looks like they're back at the table. We'll have to see if that's the case, but that's what President Trump is telling us right now. They're coming back to the table to continue with the larger set of trade talks.
And let me get, Dr. Grant, your overview of the current status of the trade war with China and the Trump administration's ability to effectively put a cap on China's co-opting of America's technology, innovations, not to mention their manipulation of currency.
You're right, Arthel. It really was the co-opting the innovations. All this started for national security reasons because of China's cyber theft of U.S. intellectual property. And I think overall this trade war has made Washington realize that the role of China has to change. China has to agree to play by some of the rules in order to be part of this global system. As to the specifics of it, I think it's having a good effect. I think we're seeing China willing to try to negotiate more. There's a lot they have to change, but at this point in time, I think Trump picked the right moment to pursue this and to try to get a better balance going forward. We have to have a strong economy to have a strong defense, and there's no question that China is posing a threat to all of that.
I want to read a quote from the New York Times. It says, quote, most economists estimate China will overtake the United States as the largest economy in 10 to 15 years. And some senior officials in Washington now view China as a steely ideological rival where the Communist Party aims not only to subjugate citizens, but to spread tools of authoritarian control globally, particularly surveillance, communications, and artificial intelligence technology, and establish military footholds across oceans and mountains. And I close with this question to you, Dr. Grant. Can President Trump win the trade war with China?
Yes, I think he can. And the surveillance and the AI, you know, Huawei is right in the middle of all that question. So can he win this war? Yeah, I think he can. Now, China's economy is slowing a little bit. Right now, our economy goes at about 19 to 20 trillion a year. Theirs at about 12 trillion. So we are ahead for now. And President Trump wants to keep the U.S. economy growing faster than China. And he wants to see China submit a bit more to the rule of law and become a good global trade partner. They aren't right now.